So nothing sets the mood to a great horror game like a terrifying opening sequence that just leaves you completely speechless. Rather, it's an intense chase sequence with monsters around every corner, or a slow atmospheric buildup that creates tension over time. Opening sequences to our favorite horror games sticks with us long after the credits roll. So on this episode of Nerdspace Games, on day 2 of the 31 Days of Halloween, we're taking a look at the scariest and most terrifying opening sequences in all of horror games. Before we get started though, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel for more survival horror content. Also hit that like button if you enjoyed today's topic. Anyway, my name is Ruben with Nerdspace Games, and these are my top 10 scariest openings in horror games. Let's get it. Number 10, Haunting Ground. While the Clock Tower name might be more recognizable for horror fans, the spiritual successor to the franchise, Haunting Ground is arguably the best version of those games. If you're a fan of classic survival horror games that focus on stalker enemies, then Haunting Ground is the game for you. Anyway, the opening of this game goes from 0 to 100 within minutes as you go from waking up in a dungeon to being attacked by a creepy man and a psychotic maid. These two characters definitely set the mood for what to expect during the rest of the game that'll involve you running around an eerie medieval castle while trying to avoid some of the most terrifying stalker enemies you'll ever encounter in a horror game. Although there is one shining moment in the opening chapter of the game, and that's when you eventually rescue a dog named Huey who will help you fight back against the dangerous individuals that you'll come across in Haunting Ground. Number 9, Little Nightmares. Little Nightmares is the perfect example of less is more when it comes to horror. While the opening of this game doesn't have your traditional big bad and disturbing enemies chasing after you, it still somehow creates an extremely terrifying environment throughout your first 15 to 20 minutes. You wake up at 6 after having a creepy ass nightmare of the Lady of the Ball, only to find yourself roaming around in the dark with nothing but a lighter. Add the dark vents and rooms that you're exploring to the absence of sound and music for an unnerving ambiance, dead bodies lynched in the background, and creepy set designs complete with horrifying set pieces like a fridge with dried up blood on it. And you easily have the perfect recipe for one of the most terrifying openings in a horror game based mostly on the environment itself. And if you really want to move a little farther, you could technically include the entire first stage as the opening of the game, to which you will then feature the warden of the prison chasing after you too. But even if you don't count that part, the eerie atmosphere of the first 20 minutes of the game alone is enough to earn this game a spot on today's list. Number 8, Forbidden Siren.
Excuse me? Are you okay? Hello? Oh my god! What do I do? Call an ambulance? Oh! An earthquake!
The opening sequence of Forbidden Siren throws a lot at the player to immediately make them aware of the dire circumstances they find themselves in. First, we witness a cult attempting some sort of sacrifice ritual of some sort. Then a zombie-like cop known as a Shibito tracks us down and shoots us. However, while the opening cutscenes of the game definitely sets the tone for a terrifying experience, it's not until the first chapter actually begins do we really understand the true fear of this game. In the opening chapter of Forbidden Siren, we're introduced to a unique and terrifying mechanic known as sightjacking. As the name suggests, this ability allows us to see through the eyes of the Shibito in the village that is trying to kill us. It's easily one of the most terrifying experiences in a horror game, especially that moment in which you sightjack a Shibito and it turns out that they are looking directly at you from behind. Yikes. Number 7, Fatal Frame. Considering this entire franchise focuses on ghost stories with some entries inspired by real life events, obviously one of the Fatal Frame opening sequences was going to crack this list. As for which one, I went back and forth between the first game and the second game. Ultimately though, I settled for the first game. While the second game is terrifying in its own right, especially that one sequence in which Mayu walks past Mio and a hand grabs Mio from behind, that first game just does a much better job at creating a tense atmosphere throughout the entire prologue of the game. In the prologue of Fatal Frame, we actually play as the brother of the protagonist, Bafuyu. He goes to Hamuro Mansion in search of his teacher who went missing while exploring this mansion. During the prologue, we experience terrifying supernatural events around every corner of this creepy dark mansion until the prologue ends with the main antagonist of the game herself, Kyrie, aka the Rope Shrine Maiden, showing up to trap him in the mansion and set the events in motion that'll ultimately bring the true main protagonist, Miku, to the mansion in search of her now missing brother. Number 6, The Evil Within. The opening chapter of The Evil Within is easily one of the more intense moments I've ever experienced in a horror game. After investigating Beacon Mental Hospital, the main protagonist of the game, Sebastian, is attacked and abducted by a deranged psychopath named Ruvik. When Sebastian wakes up, he's upside down in what appears to be some sort of butcher shop with blood and dead bodies all around him. Meanwhile, there's a man butchering more bodies in the background, and Sebastian has to swing back and forth to grab a knife in order to cut himself free. Then, immediately after the sequence, he needs to sneak around this man known as the Sadist, which eventually leads to a chase sequence in which Sebastian will need to outrun the maniac while he's chasing Sebastian with a chainsaw. While there's not exactly a boss fight with this guy like there is with other enemies in the game, this opening sequence in which Sebastian has to run away from him is easily one of the more intense and terrifying moments in a horror game. Number 5, Dead Space 2.
Listen, you're in terrible, terrible danger.
After playing the first Dead Space game, I honestly didn't think the second game would come even close to how terrifying that first game's opening sequence was. Yet, it did. In fact, it surpassed that opening sequence thanks to the position that Isaac finds himself in at the start of the second game. After waking up in a straitjacket and being rescued by a complete stranger, Isaac witnesses one of the most terrifying monster transformations right before his very eyes as his savior is brutally killed and transformed into a necromorph. Then, while still in a straitjacket, Isaac has to rush through the medical facility as necromorphs are coming at him from every angle, in which all Isaac can do is run because again, he's in a fucking straitjacket. Mind you, this is all at the very start of the game, like literally the first time you control Isaac, you're running through this area completely defenseless. It might not be one of the scariest in terms of the atmosphere, but that's only because you don't really have time to take in the environment courtesy of the intense chase sequence that the start of the game throws you into. Number 4, Visage. The opening of Visage reminds me of one of the scariest movies I've ever seen in its opening sequence, Sinister. During the opening of that movie, we are treated to a scene of old recorded footage in which a family is murdered in a pretty gruesome way. Visage is almost identical to that same vibe, as we are put into a similar situation when we experience one of the most tragic and heartbreaking openings in a horror game. During this opening, the main protagonist of the game is seen loading a revolver in which he plans on using to murder his entire family before taking his own life. Watching this sequence is not for the faint of heart, as we see his wife and kids cry out in fear before he commits the crime. Again, this opening sequence gives me major Sinister vibes, which in my opinion is one of the scariest movies ever created. The prologue of the game doesn't let down on the fear element either, as we wake up in the house immediately after the opening sequence. Exploring the eerie house alone and hearing random sounds that increase our anxiety does a great job to build up the tension before we even start the first chapter of the game. And the greatest part about this game though is the fact that you can complete said chapters in any order you see fit, and the prologue of the game allows you to explore the eerie house a bit before you dive into the true horrors that await you in this game. Number 3, Silent Hill.
What is this? What's going on here?
To this day, the first Silent Hill has the scariest opening sequence out of the entire franchise. After waking up in his car in Silent Hill, Harry Mason realizes that his daughter is missing. He gets out of his car to immediately begin searching for her, only to see her acting all creepy and whatnot as she walks away into the dense fog. We continue to follow Harry as he follows his daughter Cheryl, and throughout that time we encounter some unsettling scenes like blood along the road and other things that make us start to question what the hell happened to this town. Eventually we find ourselves in a dark alley, and after finding a body we are attacked by gray ghoul-like children carrying knives or scissors or something like that. Everything about this sequence is absolutely terrifying. The dark area that we find ourselves in with no way of escaping. The creepy gray children making terrifying sounds as they grab us. Every inch of this area is filled with blood, metal, and rust, creating a tense atmosphere. And the fact that we can prevent our death here no matter what we do. All of these elements create one of the most tense moments of the entire series as we watch Harry Mason waking up, questioning if what he just experienced was a nightmare or reality. Number 2, Outlast 2. The first cutscene of Outlast 2 might set the wrong tone when you first experience it, as it starts off with the player in a helicopter moments before it crashes. However, after this brief scene, things immediately take a turn for the worse as the opening chapter of the game amps up the scare factor almost immediately after the opening cutscene. First, you wake up in a school and you begin to experience weird and creepy visions throughout this sequence. Most notably, a creepy girl standing in the middle of a hall and a tidal wave of blood coming towards you before washing you away and waking you up in the middle of nowhere. If only that was the worst of it though. After investigating the crash, you find a body carved up and gutted in a nearby tree. Yeah, clearly the crash didn't do this to that guy, so that's terrifying. The opening moments of the game eventually leads you to cross paths with your first stalker enemy, along with the realization that you have crash landed in the middle of a village full of crazy cult members with some pretty sadistic rituals. And yeah, you thought being locked up in an insane asylum of the first game was bad? Oh man, are you in for a treat. Number 1, Resident Evil 7. Call it personal bias because of my love for Resident Evil, but the opening sequence of Resident Evil 7 is absolutely terrifying. In fact, after that first half hour to hour long prologue, the game definitely goes downhill in terms of the scare factor. While not everybody was a fan of the first person perspective, you can't deny that it created a more immersive experience that'll leave you terrified throughout most of the game. In the opening moments of the game, you travel to the Baker house and begin investigating what appears to be an abandoned house. The atmosphere is terrifying and the creaky floorboards definitely add to that creepy environment. One sequence that adds to this terrifying experience is the videotape that allows you to play as Clancy moments before he and his team are attacked by Jack Baker. However, it's not until you find Mia Winters that things begin to get much worse. After a while, Mia appears to become possessed and begins trying to kill Ethan in what can only remind you of scenes directly out of your favorite Exorcist movies. In fact, the sequence of Mia crawling out of the basement terrified me so much I had to put the controller down and stop playing for a few days. It was that terrifying, guys. Honestly, like I was that scared, no joke. So for me, this entire opening sequence goes down as the scariest opening in a horror game. But that does it for this episode of Nerdspace Games. Hit up the comments and let me know what you think of my list. Is the opening of Resident Evil 7 the scariest opening sequence in a horror game, or is there a different game that deserves that title? Let me know down below. Anyway, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to my channel for more survival horror content. Also leave a like on today's video if you enjoyed today's topic. But thanks for watching, and as always, I'll catch you guys on the next episode of Nerdspace Games. Take care.